We have 19 participants, but I guess people will join little by little. Do you see my screen? Yes? Okay, perfect. So I welcome everybody to this webinar. This is organized by CEBE. This is the Association of Spanish Scientists in Belgium. I will say a couple of words about our organization later. We wanted to organize this webinar about well-being and COVID tips to face unprecedented times, because, well, as scientists, we have seen many talks and many videos and many things about how to stop the virus, how to flatten the curve, how this virus affect the immunitary system and so on. But there is little, at least from what I saw, on the psychological point of view, and also more practical tips on how to, because we are all now forced to work at home and maybe we don't have a nice environment to do so. So I think this is very important that we listen to advice from our three amazing speakers today to cope with this situation. So our association, we do many events about science communication, also professional development, and also science diplomacy between Belgian and Spanish institutions. Like we, for instance, we bring master students to do internship in Belgian institutions and so on. And we also try to do a bit of networking. And so if you want to know more about association, please visit our website. So I will start to introduce the first speaker of today. She's Jennifer. She's a postdoctoral researcher in the Work and Organization Psychology Research Group at the VUB. And her focus is on personality dynamics, maritime psychology, and working in extreme environments. She will tell us about her, I guess, her experience on fishing in Alaska. And our second speaker is Ernst Koster. He's professor of clinical psychology in University of Ghent, and he's working to understand, reduce, and prevent depression and anxiety by focusing on cognitive process governing these conditions. Our next and last speaker is Bénédicte. She's a professor at the Faculty of Motor Science in UC-Louvain, and she does research at the Institute of Neuroscience, at the Department of System and Cognition, Laboratory of Physiology and Biomechanics of Locomotion. So I guess she has a lot of advice on how to deal with this situation and how to prevent that our body suffers. So these three speakers will tell about different topics. So Jennifer will tell us how to cope with isolation and confinement. Then Ernst will talk about constructive thinking in this time of distress, which is very important. And then last, Bénédicte will speak about well-being and teleworking. So some practical advice and some reflections to prevent musculoskeletal disorders. So with this, I have some little tutorial here for our attendees. So you have three tools. You have the chat. You can also, you can put questions, and you can also raise your hand. I want to do that. I want you to do that if you have a question. So the speakers will present, and then we will open for questions. So I think it's a good idea to keep the dynamic of the meeting instead of using the chat every time. So for those of you who has a microphone, I think it would be nice that you raise your hand. And so I will unmute you and you can ask the question as if we were live. And if you don't have a microphone, then you can use the question and answer or the chat tool. Okay. So with this, yeah, I pass the word to Jennifer, our first speaker. So I have to stop sharing here. Yeah. And then Jennifer can start the sharing screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome.
Okay. We will clap if we will. But we cannot hear the attendees, so I can clap.
Okay. We can clap. Yeah, exactly. So here we go. Nope, that's not what I want. Sorry, I had this all.
That's okay.
All together. Let's see. Slideshow. This one. Yeah. Here we go. You can see that?
Yes.
Okay. Alrighty. Thanks. Okay. Well, thanks, Anna, for having me and inviting me here. I think this is a great initiative. And as you said, there's a lot of advice on there how to combat symptoms and things like that for the coronavirus. But I think more and more we need to hear from us psychologists as we're almost a month into this lockdown, I think. So just to keep our well-being up. And as you mentioned, a lot of my research, well, I am in work in organizational psychology, and I focus on personality, but I also focus on a few other aspects, such as maritime psychology, which is the study of human behavior and the sea, and also working in extreme environments. And now that we're in this situation, I mean, we're not necessarily in an extreme environment, so to speak, but it is definitely an unusual environment. Even though we are at home, there's certainly unusual circumstances. So I wanted to share a little bit between my personal experience and then also my research, some things that you can expect to normalize some of the things that you might be feeling, and then some tips on how to stay buoyant, as the title suggests. And so a little bit about my background. I'm from Alaska. I worked on the commercial fishing boats for 20 years. For 5 of those, I owned one, and I fished by myself in the Gulf of Alaska. So I am pretty, I'd say, used to being confined and isolated. and that is a lot of what spurred my research into looking at others who are also confined and isolated. So a little bit about today's talk. I'm just going to briefly mention grief, because that's one thing that I have seen very little in the media about. So I just want to mention that and how that pertains to the coronavirus, and then talk a little bit about isolation and confinement, and then some coping mechanisms, and also some further resources. There's some links that the participants can go to after the webinar here. And so I'll just dive in with grief. I mean, it seems something that, I don't know, like I said, I haven't seen too much about it. But that's something that I think that we all are going through for sure. And in the beginning of this, there was definitely a lot of denial, and then anger, of course. And I think, at least for me, once I realized that how these 6 stages of grief kind of pertain to the coronavirus, then I was able to sort of move into more of the acceptance role of it. So, and I don't think any of us are quite at the meaning making stage yet. I think that'll be, I don't know, longer down the line. But just to know that these are the stages of the grief, and they're not linear. You know, you could cycle back and forth in between some of them. So, but I think, like I said, once I sort of pinned it down to that's a lot of what I was feeling, the discomfort that I was feeling, then I was able to, once I put a label to it, I was able to sort of cope with it and move on from that. And so next I want to talk a little bit about isolation. I mean, I probably don't need to define it because everyone's sort of living it right now, but it is a physical separation from others and the reduction of meaningful stimuli. So there's several different kinds of isolation. I mean, there could be physical or social isolation. And some of us are experiencing different ones, depends on where we are in the lockdown and who we're living with, and whether we're working from home or not. But that can, in general, generate quite a few negative emotions, such as loneliness and boredom and depression. And so I keep hearing time and time again that we should really take advantage of this opportunity to stay busy and be creative and do all the all these art projects that we've been wanting to do and things like that, which is great. But I think also too, maybe now that we've been in isolation and can lock down for so long, if once we've hit this acceptance of grief, that we can maybe shift our focus to being more creative. And I think Ernst is going to help us do that and give us some tips. But I think also too, in the beginning, it's just not possible to skip over some of these negative emotions and into the positive. I think some of them you have to realize that it's a global pandemic. Of course, people are going to feel depressed and a lot of anxiety with the uncertainty of that, and job uncertainty, and a lot of anger and boredom. And I'm not saying that we should stay here either, of course, but again, I think once you name something and you can help people kind of move through them. So, and there's a little bit more reading on the bottom there. And then also, the other thing I wanted to say about isolation, the one thing though that is our enemy is boredom and monotony, and that's what I found in my research, and then also my personal experience, that when you are isolated and then the day becomes so mundane, with the reduction of like the definition says stimuli, that I think that's really the enemy that we should keep try to keep at bay. And it's tricky. It's a fine line, because we should also build a routine, and that's good. But we need enough variance in that routine to help stave off boredom. And it is difficult if we're working from home and not going out and doing the same things. But there's still a few things you can, I don't know, you can, when you do go out for a walk, I've been trying to I do this loop and take different directions. I do it different directions every day, just to try to keep monotony at bay, and cooking different foods and things like that. I've even been moving around in my apartment and having my office in little different places, just to kind of change the view a little bit. So there's not a whole lot you can do, but if you get a little bit creative, you can try to do something with the area that you're in. And then, so confinement is limited physical mobility, or again, the reduction of stimulation. So it's a little bit similar to isolation, and it can cause some of the same negative emotions. But here is where it's slightly different, because it depends on, again, who you're confined with. One of the big issues of being confined with maybe a bunch of people or a few people would be lack of privacy or lack of personal space. And of course, maybe a rise in interpersonal conflicts and arguments and things like that. And maybe rumination, which is kind of when your brain starts like a broken record, just repeating this negative talk. That's rumination. But again, just knowing some of these and maybe having a reason why you could be so irritable or prone towards disagreements is I think, again, a little self-awareness can go a long way. But I will say though, for the lack of privacy and personal space, I mean, that's a huge issue on these little boats that I used to work on, and personal space doesn't have to be physical. It can be kind of psychological or mental as well. And one of my a study that I'll share at the end, and the link is there now. One of my participants said that silence is as good as another room. And I think that was really poignant, because sometimes that's all we can have is silence, you know, if we can't physically go into another room. So again, it's just sort of making do with the situation that we have at hand. And then I have some coping mechanisms for dealing with isolation, and some of these come from personal experience, and some of them comes from the research. So one upside that, at least in one of the research I did, was the upside for isolation is really a sense of cohesion. People felt really close to the people that they were around, and like, for example, the collective action of the lockdown, and in our neighborhood, every evening at 8 o'clock for I don't know how long, maybe because the weeks are all blending together for a few weeks, we applaud the healthcare workers. And so we all hang out our windows and clap and wave to each other. And that's, even though I don't know my neighbors, and most of them I've never seen, but I see them for a few minutes every day. And that really does create a sense of cohesion. And also another upside of being in isolation is the camaraderie that you have with the people who you're isolated with. So I'm sure if everyone has housemates now, you know, by the end of this, you're going to have so many inside jokes about coronavirus, and really only you're going to understand that. And it also builds rapport with the people that you know you're stuck with. And the other thing too, that even if people, you know, even if you're not with somebody, for example, our colleagues have a virtual coffee break every day at 10 o'clock on Zoom. And so, you know, we check in and find out how our colleagues are doing, and things like that. Maybe talk a little bit about work, but mostly it's just talking about our well-being. And that's been really nice to share what other people are going through, and that helps with the isolation. And then also too, just change your personal narrative. You know, I think it would be one thing if you were in solitary confinement, you know, because it was your prison sentence or something. But, you know, being that we're not being locked down to be punished, you know, but because it's to save lives. So if you could focus on that, change your personal narrative to focus on the bigger picture and how this is contributing to, you know, not overwhelming the healthcare workers and helping not spread the virus. That's a good thing to keep focus on. And then also too, one thing that I've found is quite interesting is we're getting to know people in a different way. You know, even like, for example, tonight, you know, everyone is looking at the insides of our apartments, and you know, I think this is you know, quite a unique situation. And even talk show hosts in the US, you know, Trevor Noah and Stephen Colbert are doing their shows live from their, maybe not live, but from their living rooms. And so we get to see people in definitely a different light. And I think that is definitely a upside to the situation we're in here. Let's see. And then some coping mechanisms for confinement. And again, this is from one of the study I've done. A lot of the participants found that they really enjoyed the simplicity of, in their case, being out in the middle of nowhere on a fishing boat, because, you know, life isn't such the rat race over there, you know, and they can slow down, and I mean, they're forced to, and just really be present with their job and their daily life. So in a way, a simple, you know, our lives have become so complex, and now they are reduced to being very simple, of just staying at home and, you know, going to the grocery store every now and again, and you know, going for a walk if you can. So, and of course, we don't have to commute. We can teleconference in our pajamas if we would like. And then once you are in a better headspace, I mean, there is more leisure time for the hobbies if you would like. And then also too, exploring our own backyards, since here in Belgium, we're not permitted to go to different neighborhoods to go for walks, unless now you have small children, you're allowed. But So people are either literally just going to their own backyards or gardens, I think, or just staying around locally. And there's some trails by my house that I've been walking through, and normally I only get to do it every, I don't know, maybe once a week. And of course now I get to do it every day. And it's been really nice just to see how the flowers are blossoming and how the farmers are, harvesting and planting seeds and things like that. So just kind of being really appreciative of the local beauty around me, and having extra time for hobbies once you're in a proper headspace to do so. And then fostering either spirituality or gratitude. I mean, I'm pretty fortunate actually that I feel lucky that I haven't been hugely affected by the coronavirus. I mean, I still have my job. I can work from home. I did get the coronavirus, I'm pretty sure, like 2 weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago. I didn't go to the hospital to get tested. It was mild, but I guess, the situation could be a lot worse. And it is a lot worse for a lot of people. So while this is, fairly inconvenience, I would say, I'm still grateful for having that it hasn't totally done a 180 and turned my world upside down. And then the heroes things I couldn't help, but that's a little bit strange, but it seems like, people who are normally not doing maybe much to contribute to society, or I shouldn't say that, let me rephrase that. So of course there's a lot of heroes, and the healthcare workers are one of them, but there's also too people who can do something are finding ways to do something. So for example, the billionaire Jack Ma, I think even like a few weeks ago or maybe a month ago, he was already donating quite a bit to the cause, and the owner of Twitter there as well just donated, I don't know how much money, quite a large sum of money. So, and then just real quickly, the resources, and so a lot of this research came from my article there, the stressors, coping mechanisms, and uplifts, which is the positive aspects of commercial fishing in Alaska. And I didn't talk much about personality, but I would like to just brief on that there's a pretty good website here. It's free, and it will give you a big 5 personality, and I think that will help with self-awareness. And well, no matter what we do, people are going to react differently, and a lot of that is going to depend on their personality. And same thing with the coronavirus. So for me, I'm an introvert, so I'm kind of quite content to be here locked in my little apartment by myself. Of course, it does get lonely at times, but if I were an extroverted person, it would be much more difficult. So I think that it's just interesting to know our own personality, like I mentioned, just for self-awareness. And then you can, realize if you're very low in agreeableness, perhaps that's why you keep fighting with your roommate or something like that. Or if you're very high in openness, maybe just rolling with the punches a little bit more. The job uncertainty isn't as detrimental for you as somebody who is not so high in openness. So there's that. And then I mentioned this a little bit before the webinar, but there's a YouTube channel now, and it's featuring experts in isolation. And there's only a few little videos now, but mine will be up at the beginning of next week. And there will be also more and more as that's building. So you can hear different stories about people working in isolations, and not just academics, but it's a mix of people who study isolation and also people who have worked in remote areas. And then Support the Workers is an initiative that is helping support the healthcare workers, actually, and I think that's a great idea, and you can check that out. There's tips on resilience and burnout and post-traumatic stress disorder and the like as well. So I think that's all I have.
Thank you. I will clap for you. in name of all our muted attendees.
Okay.
Thank you, Jennifer. It was very interesting. So for the attendees, we will have all the questions at the end. So maybe we can welcome our next speaker, Ernst.
Hello.
Hello. I will mute myself.
See whether I can get my presentation to work. All right. Good evening, everyone. So my job is made a lot easier by Jennifer, so that's fantastic. And when I received the invitation of your organization, I was very happy to come and talk. Normally, I'm always happy to come and talk, but there's a specific reason for that. I'm very happy to talk to you guys today. I've had the pleasure of having two Spanish postdocs working with me for a couple of years. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately for them, one of them got a permanent position in Madrid, but unfortunately for me, they left. But of course, I've seen how they, well, they worked, they were amazing people, but I've also seen how much they struggled in being away from home, away from family. And so I can imagine for many of you, it must be a bit of the same. And even worse if family is in bad shape, perhaps. I hope not. But anyway, so that's why I really wanted to make the effort to come and talk to you guys today about this topic. And of course, I think we need to, at the onset, recognize there's a lot of heterogeneity in different circumstances that people can be in. For some of us, this is sort of a natural continuation of the natural confinement of a scientist. For others, of course, it's very different with much more financial stress about family members, having to face working while keeping track of 5 kids. So I think, of course, it's very difficult to have a number of ideas and suggestions very decontextualized. So of course we need to take that heterogeneity a little bit into account in what I'm going to talk about today. So I decided to keep things pretty basic because I think most things that are important these days have to do with very basic things. And I wanted to talk a little bit about constructive thinking in times of this specific COVID distress that's keeping us occupied in so many different ways. So I'll be talking a little bit about the thought processes here, but if we're talking about any type of psychological advice in this context, of course we need to talk basics first. And so what do I mean with that? Especially in this type of special situation, I think doing these basic first, I always compare this to a temple. You can think about all kind of very pretty constructions on the roof of the temple and what you want to make and how you want to sculpt all of this, which has to do with, of course, everything you want to do in making meaning out of this situation and all kind of higher order processes. However, these things only make sense if the basic pillars of the temple are a little bit firm and intact. Otherwise, the whole thing is going to collapse anyway, no matter how much time and effort you spend on the thought processes. So I think some of these basics, which are they're of course self-care related to having a bit of structure in your day, making sure you get onto some sort of a rhythm, having a good balance between being active and also making sure that you end up in a good work-life balance, because for some of us this might be seen as, oh, now this is the time that I can finish all my papers and let's start working like crazy because there's no distraction. I think it's very important to really keep the balance between work and life and to not forget investing in the latter one, especially for academics. That seems to happen a little bit sometimes. Making sure you take care of yourself at the level of food, nutritious food, drinking, not too much alcohol, those sort of things. Sleep. Also this, if you're more in isolated context, you might be tempted to continue this Netflix series till 3 in the night. But do know that if your sleep gets disturbed, it's one of the best predictors for mental health problems later on. So do take care of yourself at the level of sleep. And a concept that I stole from Paul Gilbert, who talks about compassion, is in the context of social distancing. We should better refer to this as safe relatedness. So making sure that maybe dependent on your personality type, if you're very introverted, you might not need too much of this, but if you're extroverted, you need your social relationships in order to feel well and to make sure that you relate to people in a safe way. These things to me are really the basic pillars. If I would work with anyone in my clinical practice, if these things are not okay, then we don't move on to the next phase, because otherwise there is going to be problems. Okay. So if we have these basics covered, then let's think about the thought processes. So the context where I'm coming from a little bit is research on worry and rumination. So that's the clinical psychology context. So how are these two things distinct? So worry has to do with thinking about the future and being worried about what's going to happen next. Rumination is the more depressive twin, I would say, of the two constructs. And rumination has to do with why is my life going this way? Why am I always a failure? And oftentimes has a past, a reflective side to it. But with both these thought processes, we do know that they are risk factors and involved in anxiety and depressive problems. So if one can get hooked on those repetitive negative thoughts strategies, and that's how I sort of combine the both of them. And so we really need to think about how do we manage our levels of worry, especially if family is ill or financial troubles arise. How do we make sure that these type of thought processes stay adaptive and don't go to the dark side and are going to make you unhappy? So, of course, the situation really calls for worry and reflection. Health worries. If you don't have any health worries by now, I think there's something pathological wrong. And of course, reflection, if we spend more time alone and in isolation, it's also one of those times where you start reflecting on your life and what you've achieved and where you failed and those sort of things. I think it's important to really have sort of this continuum view about this, not to think too binary, like I cannot worry, I shouldn't worry, or I shouldn't ruminate. Of course, these processes are very logical and very adaptive at this moment. If you're not worried about anything these days, then that's not very adaptive. So the question I want to talk most about today is what determines whether thought processes are helpful. And then maybe for a clinical psychologist, you're thinking that I'm going to say that now you need to have all kind of happy thoughts and think in a very positive way and those sort of blah, blah. So it's important to know that I absolutely am not a believer in much of that. And I think there's other ways that are more helpful in helping us recognize what determines which type of thought processes are helpful or not. So let me go through them in a bit of detail. So one of the ways in which we can think constructively about difficult situations, and this really calls for thinking and being sharp, is concrete versus abstract thought. Oftentimes, thinking in a very concrete way helps to think in a problem-solving way, whereas thinking in a very abstract way doesn't help you to get anywhere. What do I mean with that? Or can I give an example? So if I now start thinking, oh, why is everything so miserable, everything so lousy? Then this is a type of thinking, it doesn't really help anything. If I'm being more concrete in my thinking and thinking like, hey, I'm feeling so miserable, what could help me feel a little bit less miserable, or what's in this situation is making me so miserable? It's the kids yelling all the time. Then it lends itself much more towards problem solving instead of just being stuck in negative thought. So being more concrete is helpful. The second thing, and I've added some references if you want to read more about any of the stuff I'm saying, then you can check out the work of the folks I've been putting there behind brackets. The second thing, very important, if you're in an emotional situation or a stressful situation, then the level of whether your thinking is helpful is dependent on how clear you are at the level of emotions. I think Jennifer already alluded to some of that. I'll give you a stupid example. So if I break up with my romantic partner, if I say then afterwards, yeah, I feel very lousy and I feel bad, then there's not so much I can do within that. If I'm more specific and think and unpack this feeling bad, maybe I feel guilty for mistakes that I've made in this relationship. And so maybe I can prevent some of that. Maybe I feel sad for being more lonely, where I can think about, okay, maybe I need other people in my life. The more differentiated our negative thought, our negative feelings are, the more easily it is to have them help you understand yourself and also have some adaptive action related to them. Another thing that's been investigated quite a bit lately is you can think about yourself in a very self-immersed perspective, where you are seeing what you've been experiencing, versus in a bit more self-distance perspective, like in a third person. If you were a fly on the wall, thinking about, hey, what's Ernst doing here? Why is he feeling this way? This latter type of thought has been related to more adaptive decision-making and less negative emotions. So that might be something helpful. And note that this is something different than being very avoidant of your emotion. Oftentimes, clever decision-making has to do with making decisions where you factor in your emotions, because they are, of course, very relevant feedback signals in whether you're doing something that's okay to you or not. And finally, self-critical versus a more compassionate, mindful thinking style. So of course, this situation is novel. And so what you want is to have a bit of room to experiment. And if you want to experiment with yourself, yeah, you're going to be wrong quite a bit of the time. And so you need sort of a compassionate mindset in order to be able to make mistakes and to allow yourself to make mistakes. We all are seeking our way in this, and it doesn't make sense that you should be now super productive or your other colleague is so much better than you in making articles. It's really not so helpful. So try to be compassionate and mindful in this context. Do I still have a bit of time, or should I?
Yes. How long do you still have? You can go ahead for 5 more minutes if you need.
Okay, because I don't want to steal the time from
okay.
the final colleague. That would not be nice. So then, very brief then, we also know there's a lot of literature on emotion regulation. So where this emotion regulation, these ideas, and this is stolen from James Gross, he looks at what are the different aspects where we can decide to do things differently in order to regulate our emotions. And the situation here we cannot change too much about. We're in this COVID situation, we're in this social isolation situation. So there we don't face too many choices. However, the next step is, what do we attend to, right? And there we do have some choices. We can be hooked up to the television, constantly monitoring every next bit of information, or we could be focusing on how we could make a very nice summer barbecue for ourselves, right? So there we do have some choices in what am I going to pay attention to. A third step has to do with appraisal, where also the way you appraise this situation is quite important, where you can say, oh, this is such a disaster, now this will be the end of my PhD and everything will go wrong, and you'll be very, very distressed. And maybe for rightful reasons. But I think it's also really important to appraise the situation in a way that you can find some meaning in this. So if you say, okay, yeah, this is a nasty situation for sure, but how can I make the most out of this? And could this be a situation where I can learn something different about myself, or I can work on other skills. That could be something that's helpful. And then, of course, how you respond to the situation. Will you stare outside the window hoping it will be resolved? I do hope in the responses you'll be taking good care of hygiene and washing hands, but also selecting which type of response works for you and experimenting with that. I think that's really important in trying to figure out a good way for you to deal with this. All right, and so that's most of my questions. I became a clinical psychologist not because I like listening to myself so much. So if there are questions, I really hope we have some time to address them. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so for all, I don't know if there were new attendees, we will do the questions at the end. So with this, I thank you, Ernst. It was a very nice presentation, and welcome, Bénédicte. Ernst, you need to stop the sharing the, yes. Otherwise, Bénédicte cannot. There are, if you guys have questions, you can also, yeah, type them in the chat for later.
Ernst, excuse me, Ernst, you have to shut down the sharing stuff. Really shut down.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to talk tonight, this evening. Thanks, Anna, for your invitation. And I'm teaching well-being and health at work and how to prevent musculoskeletal disorder. It's not my main field of research. I'm more in movement and control of movement, in fact. But anyway, for teaching, that's my main field. And I think the way I prepare this webinar is, I want to say some very practical thing, because we are not used to do teleworking as we do right now. So I think it's very important to tell people that they can do something, because the first week of confinement, everybody was working a lot with a laptop, but right now it's the second week, the third week, the fourth week, and then I think we should prevent ourselves and pay attention to ourselves. So it will be very practical, and perhaps you will answer any question at the end. So I will be very happy if I can help. So first, find a place, because we are not supposed to work so many times at home. We are not supposed to have a separate room. We are not supposed to have a nice table, a nice chair, a nice PC or whatever. So first, I think we should find a place, and as I wrote, organize the day, meaning that we have to find a place and a time. And if you are working at home with your family, and if you are working at home with a child running all the time in the house, and it's normal, I mean, that's absolutely normal, but we have to, if we want to work, and if we want to stay at home with a social relationship with everybody, we have to find a place and we have to find a time. So I think that's not that easy. So that's the first step. And perhaps organize the time will mean, I mean, in my case, it's like that. I'm working half a day, and the working for my job, for the university, half a day right now, and the afternoon I'm taking care of my child, which is, I mean, she's 6 years old, so I have to, I mean, to do school at home. But I think it's normal. I mean, I have the chance to do it. I mean, that's great. But at the time, it's not that easy. So we have to organize our space and our time. And then we have to adjust the place where we are working. And this is ergonomics, of course. But I think it's important also to give that positive message that we can do something, even if the table is not perfect, even if the chair is not perfect, even if the windows, the light, and blah, blah, blah are not perfect, we can do some stuff. And then avoid laptop. Please, everybody, please, please, please avoid laptop. I know it's not that easy. You have a laptop, you don't have another screen. But if you have a laptop, you have to do something about that. I will tell you a little bit later. There is no perfect posture, even if you do as I recommend, and I will recommend in a few minutes. It won't be perfect. You have to move. You have to move, you have to move, and you have to exercise. And I don't mean exercise doing running and a lot of sweating, and you just need to move, to exercise, to stretch. And I will give some advice also. And then, as it has already been said in this web seminar, you have to maintain the right balance between your life and your work, and your life at home and your work at home, as everybody has to stay home right now. So let's go to some points. Just a few words about risk factor. I mean, I suppose you know them. There are three main families: the physical, the psychological, and organizational risk factor, and those environmental one. So talking about force, posture, repetition, I will tell you some example. Talking about psychological and organizational, we have already talked a little bit about those, but there are some interesting ones that I want to perhaps repeat or talk again. The fact that we are interacting or not interacting with others, the fact that perhaps we are overloaded, or perhaps we are not overloaded, so we are there is some boredom possible. Perhaps we are stressed to do our best, we are alone to do it, or not exactly alone, but we are alone in face of our computer. Perhaps we don't have the enough resources, or the good resources, sorry. Perhaps we have right now a very how can I say that? A supervisor very attached to check every minute, every hour what we are doing, what we did today, what we are supposed to do the next morning, and blah blah blah. Or perhaps there is no supervision. So perhaps some people are a little bit lost in what they have to do. Perhaps it's not clear what they have to do, the purpose of their work right now. The question of the work schedule: how do we work? Half day, 8 hours a day, during the night, because the house is more calm during the night, so we work at night. What kind of shift do we do? And do we exercise? Do we move? Do we blah blah blah? And so the environment noise, is it silent? Where do we have to go to have some silence? And we need silence to be concentrated. I mean, to have our brain. I mean, I need silence to have my brain working. Temperature, is it hot? Too hot? Right now, I'm in the attic. It's quite hot. It's not the hottest way, the hottest day of the year, but it's quite hot. So do I have fresh air? Is it hot? Not hot? If I'm working in the basement, perhaps it's too humid, and this kind of environment, it has to be checked also. And the lighting, so it's related to the screen orientation, to the place which we are where we are working, near the windows, far from the windows, back from the windows, in front of the windows, all those kind of position of the PC. So those are examples for some risk factor force, posture and repetition, keyboarding for several hours a day without taking a break. So this is just a simple example of the kind of situation that we are all meeting right now. For the posture, I don't know if you are doing that, but to put one leg under the other and to be sitting like that, I mean, it's not quite good for your back. So, talking about recommendation, I don't know if you know that. Perhaps I hope so. I hope so. But anyway, let's take a few minutes to go through. So, what I try to do is to go point by point. So, the height of the chair, you have to have your side horizontal. You have to have 90 degrees, the knee at 90 degrees. This is in the blue. You have to have your feet on the floor. Everybody has anthropometric dimension. So if you have quite short leg, you could put a book on your feet. It doesn't matter what it is, but you have to have your feet touching the ground. For the seat deep, you have to have in purple here, you have to have space between the end of the seat and the back of the knee. Okay, I mean 2 or 3 fingers, something like that. You have to have your gaze horizontal. Please arrange. I mean, make yourself, and to do that, you have to play with the height of the chair. And the height of the screen. So that's why I don't recommend laptop, because it's impossible, in fact. So you have to play with the height of the chair to have your gaze horizontal and generally at the top of the screen. And you have not to have your head like that in extension, not to have your head like that, just like that, chin tucked in. So your head neutral position. That I said that. You have to have some break, especially if you spend your day always. I mean, right now, always with a computer, which is perhaps not the case in your normal life. Please take some break sometimes and try to look someone else at another distance, so to make to give some break to your eyes. The distance of the screen, you have to have one. Could you see that one arm, the distance? And if you can see the screen, I mean what is written on the screen, you have just to magnify the font, but you have to have your screen at that distance, not closer, not far away, just like that's the rule, the simple rule. And as I said before, also please don't put your screen too close to the windows, and try not to have the sun going from the other side of the screen or back from your back, because you will have some glare, and so you will fatigue your eyes. What else? Laptop. I already said it, but I want just please do it. Why? Because you see on that schema, if you have a laptop, you have to have your head like that, and then you will fatigue your neck muscle, but also, I mean, all those muscles at the back. Avoid if possible. If not, if you don't have another machine, please put an extra screen if you have one. At least it will be, I mean, it will be better. And a screen that you can adjust, of course. If not, Move, move, move. Don't stay hours and hours and hours in front of a laptop, using a laptop. A laptop is supposed to be used half an hour or sometime when you are traveling. It's not an office desk, it's a laptop. So please move, exercise, stretch, stand up, cross the room, go back, move, move, move. Don't stay with that position all day long. I mean, of course, if you are young, perhaps you won't feel something, but then years after years after years, I mean, be careful. So what else? Armrest, that's very important. Please, in most cases, avoid them. Why? Because they are not at the right height, and they don't allow you to be close to your table. Because if the armrest is hitting your table and it's not at the right height, you will be able to be too far away from the table. So please check your armrest. They have to be at the right height. So like that, when you have your elbow flexed at 90 degrees, and not too long also. So if they are not well, remove them or buy another chair, but I mean, remove them. Keyboard, okay, on the table, elbow at 90 degrees, mouse exactly the same. Back support, if you have a nice chair, I mean, and you can adjust the back support, please do it. And document holder, try to put them not on the side, but I mean, a little bit on the side, but not too much on the side. Usually the side of your dominant eye. The phone, don't use the phone like that. Use headphone. And so here I have some recommendations. Do I have still 2 minutes, Anna?
Yes, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay, good. So, same posture. So to do that, you have to adjust your workstation, take some rest. As I said, no perfect posture. Move, move, move. Think convenience, meaning organize your desk. Don't put the stuff you need too far. Clean your desk. Put on the desk just what you need for work. So be tidy. Your leg, okay, your leg. As your desk is not a office desk, perhaps you are using a table in your place. Please clear above the table to have place for your leg, and so to be comfortable for your leg also. So not just the upper arm and the back, but also the leg. Try to be relaxed. You can do stuff without pushing on your keyboard, without typing, to having using a lot of force. There is no need. So try to be relaxed. Straight the arm. Try to avoid to work with your right like that, not like that, or like that, or like that. Try to have a position in the middle. So avoid to push your mouse too far away from you, for example. And do some stretching exercise. As you will see, there are some information at the end of the presentation, and there are details about all those stretch exercise. I think it's a good idea sometime. It doesn't take long to do it, but it's a good idea to do some of them for the wrist, the forearm, the back, the neck, the shoulder, the back. And so that's the book. I mean, I'm one source of this presentation is coming from that book, which is coming from the Work Compensation Board in Alberta, Canada, and they have a nice way also of presenting the stuff. They want people to pay attention to them, to do something and then to move. And I just had, don't wait everywhere. So don't wait to do that. It's time to do it. Otherwise, I think the confinement, if it lasts 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, weeks, it will be very long for your body. So that's it. I hope it will be helpful.
Thank you, Bénédicte. I will clap on name of the attendees. It was very interesting and very funny to see myself checking all this and finding that many of them were wrong. So I really had to change some of them.
I have to stop the sharing. How do I do it?
Yes, so I propose we all keep the, if you stop the sharing, and for the attendees, I see that we already have some questions in the questions and answer. For the rest of the attendees, if you want to raise your hand to ask a question, I will unmute you and you can speak out loud so we can hear you.
Excuse me, Anna, excuse me.
Yes.
Do I have to stop the video? No.
It could be nice, yes, so we have the, yeah.
Oh, that's me, okay.
I mean, not the video, the screen, sorry.
Yeah.
You
on
have
the bottom
it on
that's where
top.
it says share screen.
Yeah, and you can stop this share screening on your...
oh, yes.
Yes,
that's
perfect.
It. Thank you, sorry.
Perfect. So I see in the chat that you, Ernst, you already answered one of the question. We can, if that person didn't get the answer, then we can, she can raise the hand. So I have more questions here. I will read them. The first one, I don't know which order. Well, I will read. Yes, I know now. So from Elena, hello all, thank you for your talks. What do you think about the increased screen time? It will have an impact after confinement. We work in front of a screen, and then for resting, we video call our family and friends. That's true. Or watch Netflix episode. It's true, we go from one screen to another. Any tip on how to detox on this screen attachment?
I won't go that far talking about intoxication. I think when the situation will be back to normal, we will be very happy to stop watching a screen. Yes. I think so. I mean, this is a very positive point of view, and I don't know. I'm not Astradamus, but I think I'm not worried about that. I'm worried right now concerning the posture, the fatigue, and the fact that it's not easy to work at home with everybody at home too, and so we have to pay attention to ourselves, we have to pay attention to the others, so it's kind of confined with people. I mean, it's not that easy. So I think that the question of screen, we'll see, but I think the question of screen, I think we have to take care right now. I'm not that negative concerning the future, but perhaps Ernst or Jennifer, they have more information about that.
Jennifer, you have to unmute yourself if you want to speak. Yeah.
So I think for most adults, I'm also not too worried. We're going to see whether we can still detach the adolescents from their games and social media. That's a different ball game.
Yeah.
And I think for ourselves, I think it makes a lot of sense to really put in some breaks between screen time. Go outside, go for a walk, and really, especially if you find yourself in the same posture for a long time, and after that you're fully stiff and your eyes start to hurt, then really maybe put a small clock or an alarm just to notify yourself, okay, now it's time to step away. Yep. I've had it a couple of times that I started working in the morning from 8, and then it was 11, and I was still working, where I thought, no, this doesn't make any sense. I need to put in breaks. Then you need to make that.
Yeah. Maybe also read a book instead of watch a Netflix episode or something like that. I don't know.
Or perhaps doing nothing. I mean,
doing nothing.
Yes. I mean, we don't have to be busy
by the window.
I think we are right now. I mean, in my view, at least, we are quite busy. Even if it's strange to say that, but I think my brain is working all the time because the situation is not that easy. So I think perhaps we could. I mean, we should do nothing.
Yeah. Especially these screen time meetings. I've noticed the difference when I see patients for an hour versus when I do an online session for an hour. The difference between how taxing it is, it's really so much more heavier if it's online. So then you just need to put in more breaks, absolutely, because it's more exhausting.
I'll go for the second question. It's for Ernst. Hi, interesting talks. Could you give a specific example about how the fly on the wall idea would work specifically to help discover or explain own emotions or other aspects of myself?
I tried to answer this very eloquently in the chat.
In the chat,
so for time purposes, unless the person
we'll
says
go
I
to the next one.
in a horrible way, but
yeah. For Bénédicte, just wondering, can you recommend a fairly priced, good ergonomic chair?
I think, I mean, that's a tricky. That's a tricky question, and it doesn't. It's not because the ergonomics word is written on the box on the chair. That's ergonomics. The best chair, it's the one that you can adjust easily, having 5 roulettes, 5 wheels. That's it. So you can move it. I will say with no arm rest. I mean, you don't need, if you are using a computer, you don't need arm rest. The price, the question was about the price.
Yeah, if you recommend one good price ergonomic chair, but yeah.
You have to, I mean, you have at least to test it. I mean, that's not easy.
Oh, that's impossible nowadays.
I mean, nowadays, of course, but I mean, in the future, you have to test it in the shop. I mean, I won't recommend to buy it right.
Okay,
I don't think.
Sorry.
Just excuse me. Just one more thing. I don't think you need. I mean, we need to buy new chairs. I think we could do with what we have and adjust and adapt. And I mean, ergonomy is not just buying stuff. You can do with very, I mean, easily, not easily, but you can, I mean, you can, I'm not convinced you need to buy something. You could do a lot with what we have. But for that, we have to move. As Ernst said before, staying 3 hours without moving, I mean,
yeah. I have someone in the chat. Actually, I think Ernst, you send the message to the panelists, to ourselves. So I will just copy the question to all panelists and attendees. This is sorry, I didn't mean to do that. This is a document of myself.
That's a fact.
Yes, technical problems. So it doesn't copy. Well, you will have again okay, here you have. While doing so, I will unmute one of the attendees who has one question so that person can speak up. Allow to talk. Angel, you can now talk. Can you? Yes, you can. Yes.
It's a question for Ernst. You said about the positive thinking that these days, we are facing in the media every single day the number of deaths per country, and even comparisons between several countries within Europe or nowadays in US as well, when Belgium is beating Netherlands in the per million death in inhabitants, and so how can we avoid that when the media is so pushing so much information to us, apart from pushing the tab in the browser, of course, or taking the screen off? What can we do to do this more positive thinking, or any other advice that you can give on that?
So of course, you're definitely still allowed to do some positive thinking. The only thing is, in times of these sort of crisis, I think it's very easy to say, well, you should think positive, but I don't think it's great advice. I think it's more helpful advice to try to think in a way that's constructive to you. And so where I do feel that, and that's also what the general recommendations say, that, you know, making sure you limit some of the media intake. I mean, it's interesting to follow some of that, but if you hear 4 times a day the comparison between countries, I don't think it's necessary to know that. So I think limiting your media intake might be something useful. And for the rest, trying to focus, try to get your attention and your activities to focus on stuff that's meaningful to you or that you enjoy. So if you say, well, basically I have more time and I'm bored to death, but I haven't been painting in my apartment, then that might be something that's useful to you, which also gets your head off all the negative stuff that's going on. Or if you can help some people in the chat group being less lonely, and that's something meaningful for you, then go to work. And then you'll see that even in those difficult times, you'll find quite a number of positive things. And we've been, in my group, we've been working very hard to get a chat room going for medical personnel. And even in nasty times, but that's been very rewarding to do. So I think finding useful things to do in situations, it's definitely possible. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Angel. I will mute you back. From Pedro, this is also for Ernst. I understood the depreciative thoughts, but as he addresses the macro level abstract view, so not positive nor negative. I didn't understand the question. Maybe you.
I'd love to answer that question, but I need to understand it better before I can.
Okay, so that's yeah. I don't know, Pedro. Maybe you can put it again on the chat. Go on. I will go to the next from Maripaz. We are 2 people working at the same table. We don't have another one, and having lots of meetings. What can we do not to annoy each other when we talk at the same time? That's hard.
I'm a drummer, and you have these headphones that cancel out noise.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe that's something you want to have.
Yeah, but I think you should, I mean, they should, that's what I said at the beginning, they should organize their day. So they should, I mean, I think it's perhaps they will last a little bit of time, but I mean, they think they will lose sometimes by sharing the talking time, I would say. But I think at the end, it's not a loss of time. I don't know the situation, but my first recommendation would be to organize it differently, at least partly, to avoid this kind of situation. Because having someone, even with a cask, I mean, having someone talking 1 meter, I mean, half a meter, just, I mean, you can't concentrate. I mean, yeah. I mean, I can't. I mean.
Okay, going to the next question from Noelia. Hi, what are your thoughts about confinement effects on people with vulnerable positions or situations, as unemployment or mental problems, as depression, anxiety, how these people should address now these problems, especially when the therapies had to be discontinued in person. Yeah, maybe Jennifer can comment on that.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, and I've been reading about that in the news more and more. You know, that we're going to have this avalanche of psychological, you know, issues as everyone's kind of putting it. But I think also Ernst is shaking his head, so maybe he has something different for us. But yeah, I'll give it to him. But the only thing I'm seeing is a few of the services are online now, where you can call in to different places. And okay, it's maybe not exactly the same, but it's certainly better than anything. I know the VUB has a Brook, and that you can do online phone consultations, and probably Ernst has more information on that.
So I think there's still psychologists who do face-to-face work. So especially for more severe patients, and some people also just don't react well to the online things, then still some therapies are being done. Also, my practice, so normally we see a lot of patients here with my colleagues, and every one of my colleagues has switched to online sessions, and that works pretty well for many people. Not for everyone, but for many people. So basically, psychotherapies can continue. So I also don't really buy into this, it's going to be a flood of mental health problems. For some people, yes. So for people who were already isolated, then this, and who are getting into financial trouble and stuff, this is a really nasty situation. For some of my clients, I really see them suffering a lot, and that's really problematic. But for many other people, for some people, this also puts things a bit in perspective, or they can reconnect to some of the things they were wanting to do. And so I don't think we're going to be into this mental health hell, also because many people will have a lot of other things to deal with getting their financial situation back on track. So I don't really think we're going to be in a horrible situation, but it's definitely true that for some people this is really, really god-awful. Also for them, there's quite a bit of, there's chat possibilities, there's voluntary people who, especially for vulnerable people, have put up chat rooms, and but for some of the most difficult to reach people, or for children in very vulnerable situations, we know that this is really, really bad, and that's where I think the services need to be looking out for.
Mm-hmm. I have another question here. Thanks a lot to all of you for the interesting talks. The point of feeling guilty was touched. A lot of people think that they don't have the right to feel sad because there are people who are in worse situations and push themselves to be positive. This feels so unnatural. Tips?
I think everybody has the right to feel sad, you know, because it's such a, I mean, going back to talking about grief, I mean, even if, you know, you still kept your job and you're still, you know, you're able to work and you still have health and things like that, there's still a lot of things to grieve. I mean, our life has just completely changed. Mm-hmm. and we've had a lot of losses, of even losses of hobbies or sports, or graduation ceremonies, weddings, even funerals, the way we grieve, you know, all that has been stripped from us at the time being. And of course, that's a feeling of sadness, you know. So I guess that's, I didn't say it specifically, but that's what I was trying to say in the beginning, where, you know, rather than just, you know, switching into being super positive all the time and being super productive and you know, painting your you know, your Sistine Chapel, I mean, to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and to recognize that, you know, this is a horrible situation that we're in, and that your emotions are going to go up and down, and all of them are valid. And okay, maybe you're not as bad off as somebody else, but that still doesn't mean that, you know, that you haven't felt a loss during all this.
I have another raised hand here from Gabriela. You can talk now, Gabriela.
Thank you. I wanted to thank all panelists for their presentations. They were very interesting. And I wanted to ask Jennifer a question relating to the different personality types or the different personalities that people show in a situation as novel as this. I find myself struggling to maybe find my routine or structure my day, but I have friends who are a little more introverted and they seem to be in a sort of denial for I perceive it as a denial, but it might be because my personality is different and I feel like maybe I move through the stages a little bit more quickly now. I sometimes have conflicts comparing myself to my response to this situation to other people's responses, and I would like to ask what you think about that and what are maybe more specific tips for more extroverted people in this situation. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Gabriella, for your question. And it's hard to give these blanket tips because everybody is different. Everyone's situation is different. People's personalities are different. And so this is going to affect everyone in a different way. For example, like I said, I'm an introvert, so, the social aspect isn't as difficult for me. However, that's not saying that none of the introverts are suffering, and so if you're, as you mentioned, an extrovert.
Sorry, I will unmute. Sorry, Gabriela,
okay.
mute.
Okay, there you go. So if you are an extroverted person and you say, for example, have housemates, maybe you can set up something like a little date night with each other, and it doesn't have to be a romantic date, but like a coffee date, or to set aside some kind of structure to where you turn the cell phones off and the social media off and things like that, and just have a meaningful conversation. Or another thing that I've been doing is meetups online. A lot of meetups have gone virtual now. So there's a writing group, there's a book club, there's spiritual guidance. So a lot of meetups have gone virtual now. And that can be quite interesting. And there's also, I think it's called COVID-19 Solidarity. There's a few organizations in Brussels where you can volunteer your time, excuse me, to either run errands for those who are in need, or to chat with them on virtually like we are, to call them. So there's ways to fill your extroverted needs, but also too, another aspect of extroversion is activity. So it's not just socializing, but it's being active as well. And so I don't know what part of town you're living in, but I would encourage you to try to go out and be active more. And if you can't, then there's a lot of online yoga classes right now, and exercise apps, and even the meetups have free, I think, some free online yoga as well. So I would just try to keep try to just, it's, there's no magic cure for any of this. Actually, it's just a bunch of little things that we can keep doing. And what Ernst said too is remember to, sleep well, sleep at night, drink lots of liquids, limit your alcohol, and just eat healthy meals and breathe. And it's amazing. Those are so simple. But if those aren't happening, then nothing else is really going to follow suit either.
Thank you. I will take two last questions because then our speakers need to go, I guess. One very practical one. Where is it? I don't find it. In case we really need to use our laptops, and I guess this is for Benedict, it's better to put some books under the laptop or something similar to increase its altitude, its height. If you don't have a screen, I guess that's the question. Like, how do we work if we don't have a screen?
I mean, it will depend depends on you. If you are more fragile, I will say, from the neck, or if you are more fragile from the wrists. But I can't answer that question, because having the laptop too high you will, I mean, you will have you will have to maintain your arm like that to have your screen at the right, and you will have to put your laptop. So if you have arm rests high, I mean, excuse me, Jennifer.
I'm not an expert at it, but I can say, because I only had a laptop, so what I did is got an additional keyboard, because indeed, once you put the laptop up where it's high enough, then you can't reach it. So and I of course I forgot my mouse in the office, and so I bought a little mouse as well, and I'm fortunate enough to have an extra screen. So the keyboard is really, I feel a lot better in my arms and shoulders and neck, having elevating that laptop and then having a wireless keyboard.
Yeah, so thank you, Jennifer. I was talking about additional screen, but you could have additional keyboard. I mean, I mean, the way, I mean, what you have to do with a laptop is to dissociate the keyboard for the screen, in fact. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah.
And so that will be the last question. How can we cope with confinement living with our partner? So we take some time for ourselves separately. Any advice to avoid conflict?
Yeah, I'll touch base briefly, and I'm sure maybe Ernst has something to add. But I would say yes. I mean, if you know, if you're not doing what you need to do to fill up your own glass, if your glass is half empty, then you don't have anything to give to somebody else, and that would include, you know, your partner or anybody else. So I would say, yeah, try to take time for yourself when you need it, and then maybe try to you know, arrange your day to where you're both not doing the same things at the same time, and just try to be tolerant with each other, and have extra tolerance for everybody, I guess. Ernst, maybe you have something to add to that.
No, I think that's very useful advice. I mean, also, of course it depends a little bit. As a couple, you have a certain dynamic in the normal situation, and oftentimes that dynamic arose because that's the part where you guys feel most comfortable. And then I would really look at, you know, you need to have an open discussion about what things do you need. If you say, I'm someone who really cannot be together with another person, no matter how great they are, for 24 hours, which I think is a very logical thing to feel, then, you know, make sure that you talk about the situation, addressing, well, where are you with this? Where am I with this? And how can we make the situation work for the both of us? And there's no fixed form to make that work. Some people can be together 18 hours a day and then sleep, and other people really need their own personal space. And then guys just need to work out and experiment what works for you. And you might discover also very interesting new sides of your partner. So don't be all bad as well.
Okay. So with that, I hope to have answered all the questions from the speakers. And I thank you again, the attendees, and of course, our three speakers, Bénédicte, Jennifer, and Ernst. Thank you very much. I hope one day maybe we can meet in person. I don't know. And so I will give a big clap for you. And although it's almost 8, if we wait, we'll hear it from the people, you know?
You'll hear it out my windows too.
So that one is also for you guys. Okay, so with this, I will end the meeting. This is recorded, so yeah, it might be in our webpage. So thank you again, guys, and have a good evening.